Incredibly, before the war, Britain had no centralised system for protecting its best buildings. In typical British fashion, it was left to a few disparate bodies. But the war changed all that. It triggered a sense of collective ownership over our national treasures, part of the same drive that inspired the welfare state and the NHS. From now on, what Britain looked like would be defined by the state.
In 1944, a wartime town and country planning act was passed. Integral to this act were the lists, the first ever national inventory of buildings of historic and architectural importance. Most houses on the list were marked down for protection for the first time, and the whole idea of a listed building was born.
These lists would have greater consequences for Bath and the rest of Britain's buildings than all of Hitler's bombs.
In the late 1940s, the Ministry of Works appointed 30 men and women to become the first buildings investigators. One of them was William Collier.
We had to list the whole of England and Wales, the historic buildings. It was something that hadn't been done since the 11th century, since Domesday Book. And so it was really going into the unknown. We were architectural historians. It was something that hadn't been a proper profession before. It was just an enthusiasm, but it was very much up to us individually to make these lists.
Many investigators were Oxbridge educated and looked at buildings with an academic eye. They ranked them on the grounds of architectural rarity and distinction. To achieve a top billing, a building had to be unique or one of the very best examples of a particular style. Grade 1 was for exceptional buildings, like the Royal Crescent, which should be preserved at all costs. Grade 2 was for architecturally interesting buildings, which could be altered with planning permission. And the final Grade 3 was for buildings that had some architectural quirk or peculiarity, suitable for workers' cottages. This class had no legal protection. With so many historic buildings, tough choices had to be made.
We awarded Grade 3 status to buildings which just didn't quite come up to scratch. But we weren't going to ask the local authority to go out of their way to preserve them.
So when the first lists for Bath were published in 1947, the Georgian set pieces were classed Grades 1 or 2. Everything else was left unprotected. Unwittingly, what the listers had created was an open invitation for a new breed, the town planners, to start wielding their power. They were full of a post-war optimism for radical change and progress.
The Blitz gave the impetus not just to save Britain's past, it also provided the perfect excuse to rebuild for its future, sweeping away the defunct old country and starting afresh.
The trailblazer of the town planning movement was Patrick Abercrombie. He was recruited to redesign bombed-out cities like London, Plymouth and Bath.
In all devastated cities, there are some people who long for the past. They would like to see their town rebuilt exactly as it used to be. But of course, where there's been so much destruction, that's out of the question. Now, would somebody switch off the lights, please, and we have some pictures.
Abercrombie believed that modern architecture could be imposed for the common good. That new buildings and roads would help create a better society. His idea was to divide cities into zones, each with a different function. His designs left plenty of room for the motor car and healthy open spaces. In February 1945, an exhibition of Abercrombie's plans for Bath was shown at the city's main art gallery.
People came to see the exhibition in their droves. In fact, it got so busy they had to close the galleries to prevent overcrowding. What people were thronging here to see was nothing less than Bath transformed for the modern age.
Bath would be divided into 10 separate zones, with a ring road around the centre. There would be a grand concert hall, new bus station, and plenty of new homes.
These are the original 1945 plans for Bath, and they're incredibly bold. Here's the Royal Crescent of all places, turned into a civic centre with a dual carriageway running past. Abercrombie was reworking an entire city.
To make way for Abercrombie's ambitious plans, some buildings would have to be sacrificed, whether they were listed or not.
He wouldn't regard listing as meaning that a building necessarily had to be preserved. There was no sort of preservation of the building in aspect, as it were, nor that it couldn't be altered. But you should think carefully about what you did and the manner in which you did it.